saying he's more angry and more committed than ever. Interesting choice of words.
Exactly. And that's to be expected. Clearly, he's really all in on this.
Committed to what, I guess, might be
exactly, exactly. And I just think the fact he's starting off saying he's angry, and he spent a good part of his speech today talking about election integrity and the failed election system, voter ID, talked about immigration, talked about Hunter Biden's laptop. And I really expected him to come out, and especially in a red meat crowd like this, and talk about the issues that are important to the American people, the economy, inflation, certainly potentially securing the border, but crime and safety, especially with what's going on in this country. But what I think is interesting is how ever since he has announced, it really hasn't taken off, and he really hasn't really made inroads. If you look at the polls right now in New Hampshire, where he was earlier, he's behind DeSantis significantly in New Hampshire. He's going to South Carolina now, where he is ahead of DeSantis. So this is going to be an interesting juxtaposition to see how he and DeSantis try to make inroads in these key early states.
Keith, you know, he's back on the campaign trail. You know, when he says he's more committed than he ever has been, I guess my question is, what's he committed to this time? Is he committed to democracy?
I think, Jim, he's committed to staying out of jail. And I think he thinks that somehow by having this campaign that he's not seriously interested in, that somehow that's going to protect him from an indictment from the Justice Department. But, you know, if phoning it in had a definition, it's Donald Trump. This campaign that he's running right now, announcing in November of 2022, when nobody else is in the race, is all designed to prevent him from being indicted. This trip to New Hampshire and South Carolina, it's just doing the least amount possible to make him seem like he's a plausible candidate. But as Alice said, the Republican Party, I don't think that they've grown tired of Trump per se, but they've grown tired of losing. Remember, Trump said that we're going to win so much you're going to get tired of winning. Well, it's been the exact opposite for the Republicans in the past 3 election cycles, and I think they're tired of that. So that's one of the reasons why they're looking at Ron DeSantis and possibly looking at other candidates. But Trump needs to be realistic about what he's trying to do, and I think the American people know it's not a sincere and genuine campaign.
Yeah.
And I can just follow up on Keith's point there. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out and how his strategy changes once other people are in the race and are actually face-to-face against him. Talking with a lot of GOP members who were at the RNC meeting this week, they say they're ready to turn the page. And Keith made a good point that once Donald Trump is not the only man in and people have permission to seek support elsewhere, it's going to be a brand new ball game. And what people see is the Donald Trump in this race, he's going to be a completely different candidate. Once people get in, he'll start his name calling and pointing fingers at other people. But this is going to be much different than 2016.
Yeah, I mean, if he's phoning it in, he's probably calling collect. But Keith, you know, Trump's events today come after it was revealed classified documents were also found at the Indiana home of his former Vice President Mike Pence. I thought Pence's comments were very interesting here. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Now, while I was not aware that those classified documents were in our personal residence, let me be clear. Those classified documents should not have been in my personal residence. Mistakes were made. And I take full responsibility.
Keith, I mean, I covered the White House for almost 8 years. I feel like I should be going through some boxes at my home, but what do you make of that? I do think it was interesting that Mike Pence came out and said mistakes were made.
Well, you know, Mike Pence has a book to sell and a campaign to run, so I'm not surprised that he would do something like this. But I actually do applaud him for coming out and making this statement, because he didn't have to do this. And I think it was an important step, because I do believe there are other people who probably do have classified documents, maybe other presidents or vice presidents. It's important for the national security infrastructure to have this type of review. I worked in the White House. I believe, Alice, you worked in the White House. You know that when you leave the White House, it's not as rigorous a process, I think, as people might expect when you leave. Now, I didn't handle classified documents on a regular basis, but I still feel like the process for leaving for staff staff and obviously for presidents and vice presidents could be improved. But here's the thing. I didn't like what Mike Pence said when he said that mistakes were made, that passive construction. It goes back to the 1980s, I think, in the Iran-Contra scandal when Ronald Reagan used that term. I don't like it when people won't just say, I made a mistake. Irrespective of the fact he may not have packed the boxes himself, but he is responsible. The buck stops with him. So I give him partial credit for taking ownership of it, but I wish he would have gone a little bit farther.
Yeah, I think partial credit is better than no credit. I hand it to Pence for taking responsibility for it and saying he will accept the responsibility. You also have to give partial credit to current President Biden for he appears to be cooperating with the FBI on searching for these documents. Stark contrast from former President Trump, who has been really not cooperating and is really making this all about unnecessary raids on his home. And I think the bottom line is we need to get to the bottom of mishandling classified documents. And the best thing that can happen has happened, and that is the archives is asking all former presidents and vice presidents to search for these documents and turn them in.
And Keith, I want to turn now to the death of Tyree Nichols last night. That the graphic videos of his deadly beating were released. I guess, Keith, your thoughts on how we just seem to have a national problem with police brutality, and it's not being solved.
Yeah, I think that's right, Jim. I think we keep going through these cycles. You know, we had this with Rodney King. We had it with George Floyd. We had it with Michael Brown, the insurrection in Florida and in Ferguson. And I think what's happening is that America hasn't yet come to terms with the fact that we need to have whole-scale re-understanding or reimagining of the way we do policing. It's far too focused, especially in Black communities, on law enforcement and not on public safety. As someone who lived in Harlem, where I saw sort of these Scorpion unit type of activities taking place in New York City, I was very troubled by that. And I think that Black communities, we often see the police who are in our communities as occupying forces, whereas in white communities or mixed communities, the police are often seen as people there to protect them. That needs to change.
All right. Keith Boykin, Alan Stewart, thanks very much. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
Across the country today, people are gathering to honor Tyree Nichols and call for change.